You know, every so often in history, someone comes along who completely changes the game. We're about to talk about one of those people. This is the story of a man who didn't just win battles. He literally redrew the map of the world and redefined what power even meant. We're talking, of course, about Alexander the Great. And to really get a handle on just how huge his story is, we need to take a step way, way back in time.
So, let's start with a number, just to put this all in perspective. 2300. That's how many years ago this all happened. I mean, we're talking about a world that is completely alien to ours, reaching back over 2 millennia. And yet the crazy thing is, the decisions this one man made back then, they're still rippling through our world today, in our politics, our culture, you name it. It's the stuff of legends, really.
And here's the truly mind-blowing part. In a little over a decade, that's it, just 10 years, one guy created one of the biggest empires the world had ever seen. I mean, think about that. Before he was even 33 years old. This wasn't just some series of battles. No, this was like a force of nature, a hurricane that tore through the ancient world and completely changed everything in its path.
So, you gotta ask, right? Where does a person like that even come from? Well, his story starts in a place called Macedon. Now, under his dad, King Philip II, Macedon was already becoming a serious military powerhouse. They were kind of the up-and-comers on the block, tough and ambitious. So Alexander, he was literally born into this pressure cooker of power and war. It was in his blood from day one.
But here's the twist. It wasn't all just about swords and shields for him. Get this, his personal tutor was Aristotle. Yeah, that Aristotle. One of the greatest thinkers in all of human history. So you have the most brilliant military commander of his age being taught by the greatest philosophical mind? That's an unbelievable combination. He wasn't just learning how to fight, he was learning how to think. About logic, about politics. So for him, conquest wasn't just about taking over, it was about creating something bigger.
And then, boom, everything changes. His father is assassinated, and suddenly, at just 20 years old, Alexander is king. And let me tell you, the kingdom was a mess. It was on the verge of completely falling apart. Rival powers were circling like sharks. His response? Absolutely swift and brutal. He didn't hesitate. He marched on the rebellious cities and crushed them, sending a message to the entire world. Mess with me and you'll regret it. He made it crystal clear who was the boss now.
Okay, so with his kingdom locked down, Alexander sets his sights on the main event, the one big thing his father had always dreamed of, taking down the Persian Empire. Now, you have to understand, Persia wasn't just some other kingdom. They were the superpower of the day. Huge, incredibly rich, ancient, a true titan. For little Macedon, this was like taking on a giant. The ultimate David versus Goliath showdown.
So how on earth did he pull it off? I mean, look at the matchup. The Persians had everything. More money, more soldiers, more land. Alexander had a smaller, faster, smarter army. It really came down to 2 things, better tactics and his own leadership. He had this incredible infantry formation called the phalanx, but the real game changer was how he used his cavalry, which he led himself right into the thick of the fight. This wasn't some king sitting in a tent miles away. He was right there at the front. And that inspired his men to do the impossible.
And the speed of it all, it's just staggering. It was like a lightning strike. First, the Battle of Granicus in 334 BCE. Then, a year later, the Battle of Issus, and the final knockout punch came at Gaugamela in 331. In just 3 major battles, over just 3 years, the entire Persian Empire, this ancient mighty power, just collapsed. It fell apart like a house of cards. Just like that, Alexander was the master of Asia.
But then, he gets to Egypt, and the story takes a fascinating turn. They don't see him as a conqueror at all. They see him as a liberator, the guy who kicked out the Persians they hated. They welcomed him with open arms, and while he's there, he founds the city of Alexandria, which, as we know, would become one of the greatest centers of learning in the entire world. And then, the priests there declare him the son of a god, and Alexander, he runs with it. He knew that being seen as divine was a powerful, powerful way to rule.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Winning the war is one thing, right? But winning the peace, that's a whole different ballgame. Alexander had proven he was a brilliant general. Now, he had to prove he could be a brilliant ruler. And his vision for what came next was, well, it was something nobody had ever really tried before.
And this new thing he was building, we now call it the Hellenistic world. And here's the core idea. The really radical part, he wanted to fuse cultures together. He didn't want to just erase the old ways and replace them with Greek stuff. He wanted to create a new blend, a mix of Greek ideas and language with all the rich ancient cultures of the East.
It was basically the world's first great cultural melting pot, and he was the one stirring the pot.
And how did he do it? With some pretty wild ideas. For starters, he started dressing like a Persian king. He told his top soldiers to marry local noblewomen, and he did it too. He even put Persians in high-ranking positions in his government. Now, you can imagine his own Macedonian soldiers, the guys who had fought in blood for him, they hated it. They thought he was going soft, that he was betraying them. But Alexander had a bigger vision. He knew that to hold this massive, diverse empire together, he couldn't just rule by force. He had to build bridges.
So you think that would be enough, right? He's conquered the largest empire on Earth and is trying to build this new blended world. But for a guy like Alexander, enough is never enough. There was always another mountain to climb, another river to cross. His ambition was bottomless. But the thing about ambition is, eventually, you hit a wall. And he was about to hit his. Hard.
Yeah, Persia wasn't the end of the road for him, not even close. He just kept pushing, further and further east, into what's now Central Asia, and then into India. We're talking years and thousands of miles of marching. His army was completely exhausted, stretched thinner and thinner. They were at their absolute limit.
And then, right there at what they thought was the edge of the world, it happened. The one thing no one ever expected. His own army, the unstoppable machine that had conquered a continent, just stopped. They put their foot down and said, no more. They were exhausted, they were sick of the endless rain, and they had just heard about another gigantic army waiting for them over the next river. They mutinied. For the very first time in his life, Alexander couldn't get his way. His own men, the most loyal soldiers in the world, had finally had enough. He had no choice. He had to turn back.
And that moment, it really says it all, doesn't it? It proves a really simple, powerful truth. Even for someone like Alexander the Great, there's a limit. You can only push people so far. You can only defy the odds for so long. It's the ultimate lesson that no matter how powerful, how brilliant, or how driven you are, you can't conquer everything.
So he turns back from India, defeated not by an enemy army, but by his own men's exhaustion. And sadly, his story is rapidly approaching its end. Which brings us to the big question. When a man builds something so massive, so quickly, what's left when he's gone? What is the real, lasting legacy of Alexander the Great?
And the end, when it came, was shockingly fast. He's in Babylon, planning his next big adventure, and he gets sick. Within days, he's dead, at just 32 years old. And the absolute worst part? He didn't name a successor. The empire, which was really held together by his sheer force of will, just instantly shattered. His generals immediately started fighting over the pieces like wolves. It was chaos.
But, and this is the most important part of his whole story, while his physical empire died with him, his cultural empire lived on. The world he created, that lasted. Greek became the language of science and art across the known world. Cities he founded, like Alexandria, became the world's great universities. Military leaders for hundreds of years studied his battles. So in the end, he's both this incredible symbol of what one person's ambition can achieve and a stark reminder of how fragile it all can be.
Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. He conquered a massive empire of land and people, and it evaporated the second he was gone. But the empire of ideas he spread, that lasted for centuries and fundamentally shaped the world we live in now. So it really makes you wonder, what is true greatness? Is it about what you conquer and hold in your lifetime? Or is it about what you create that outlasts you?